So my name's Tori. I'm the NDIS team leader at Your Side, and I'm going to be doing this presentation with the lovely Janine. So we'll give ourselves a little bit of an intro first so you get to know us. So I've been working in the disability sector for over 10 years. One of my very first roles was being a direct care support worker, and now I support our lovely team of NDIS professionals here at Your Side. Janine, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Tori. Hi, everyone. My name's Janine. I'm a consultant here at Your Side for Carer Gateway. My background, I've worked in disability for the past 25 years. So I've worked across community sectors, education, state and federal government. So I come with a lot of background in disability professionally, but also personally, because I have two children who also have a disability and do access the NDIS. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you all about how you can navigate NDIS.
Thanks, Janine. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we are standing on today and recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I personally am presenting to you from Darug and Gundungurra land, which is in the Blue Mountains. So I'm very grateful to be standing on traditional land today.
And I'm standing on Darug and the tribe of the Guringai people today, and I'm situated at Barara.
Alrighty, so we're going to start the presentation in just a minute, but if you guys could just please stay on mute unless you have a question, just to minimise some of the background noise. We are recording this session, so if you don't want to be recorded, you can pop your video off, that's totally fine. You can ask questions via the chat box or use the reaction button at the bottom of your screen as well. Janine and I will be stopping to allow you guys to ask questions after each little chunk of information that we deliver, so please feel free just to yell out if you've got anything that you wanted to ask us. Okay, so we're going to start just talking about the NDIS in general. So the NDIS, or the National Disability Insurance Scheme, is the way the government funds support for people with a disability. It's providing a lot of choice and control to people with a disability around the supports that they access. So that includes which provider they choose to have supports from, or multiple providers they might choose to have supports from, how that support is delivered and what it looks like, who delivers their support, when the support is delivered. So really it puts that choice and control back into the hands of participants and their families around the support that they receive. The key principles of the NDIS are these four showing on your screen. So we're talking about people with a disability having the same opportunities as everybody else to pursue their goals and their dreams. Like I said before, choice and control is huge in the NDIS. You'll hear that phrase used a lot when people are discussing the NDIS. Social and economic participation, obviously it is an insurance scheme. So part of one of the core components is that people with a disability receive supports so that they can actively participate in the community and in our economy as well. So, you know, going out, spending their money, building relationships and just being part of the community like anybody else. And then capacity building is the fourth one. So that's really around encouraging people with a disability to learn skills that increase their independence, and again, feeds back into the social and economic participation of being able to participate in society. So who's eligible for NDIS funding? We will go into this in a little bit more detail, but this is just a good overview. So you need to be under 65 at the time of applying. You have to be an Australian citizen, permanent resident or protected special category visa holder. And you have to have a permanent or significant disability. We will talk more about that. Janine's got some really good slides that she's going to go into as well.
Thanks, Tori. So just in regards to the who's eligible, I think it's really important just to focus while we're talking through the next few slides around permanent and significant disability, because this is something that you really need to provide evidence to the agency about to gain access to the scheme. So everyone could just keep that sort of in their mindset just as I talk through the next couple of slides, and I'm hoping as I go through them that you'll be able to connect to that concept as we move through all the different aspects of applying for access to NDIS. So with accessing the scheme, there's actually 3 different types of access. There's what they refer to as disability access, which is a lifelong access that goes from ages 7 to 65. Once you turn 65, if you've already gained access to the scheme prior to that age, you actually have a choice whether you continue with NDIS for your supports or you decide to go to My Aged Care. It's quite a big decision because you need to take into consideration that if you do decide to stay with NDIS, that they won't actually fund any age-related needs that you have as you age. So it's quite a big decision to make. The next one, which I think people get quite confused about, is early intervention from ages 0 to 65. People often get confused because there's also access under early childhood early intervention, which is referred to ECEI. So people generally think when they hear the term early intervention, they think of children. Whereas with the NDIS, early intervention actually means that you may have a permanent disability, but the impact of that disability isn't significant enough to warrant a lifelong full disability access to the scheme. So what the agency might do is say, okay, it looks like you do need some support, but we can't decide whether you actually need that lifelong. It doesn't look significant enough. So they may grant what they call early intervention into the scheme, and they might provide you with some support for 1 to 2 years to help you build up your skills. So early childhood early intervention, or ECEI as it's referred to, is for ages 0 to 7. So with that one, you don't have to have a diagnosed disability at this stage. You can just identify that the child may have some developmental support needs, that they're not meeting their milestones. And if that's the case, you go to what they refer to as an ECEI partner in the community. So you can find these people by going to the NDIS website. There's a section there that says contact us. You type in your postcode and it will come up with a list there of who you contact. So if the child is experiencing those developmental delays, you contact those people, they'll do an assessment and they'll make a decision whether they refer you on to access the NDIS or whether they put you to mainstream supports into the community. So what happens then is if they are granted access through ECEI, they'll have therapy supports up until the age of 7 to help iron out any of those developmental needs that are happening. And then at that point, they'll need to either move back to mainstream supports in the community, like the early childhood centre or a health specialist, or if they have a diagnosed disability from that point on, then they may receive full disability access. The transition from ECEI into full disability access is often really, really difficult because sometimes the professionals will say, oh, we can't quite diagnose a disability yet, but we can see that there's still some developmental issues there. And sometimes, depending on the decision of the agency, they may say, well, you know what, we might move them on to early intervention access for another year to see if we do a bit more therapy, what that looks like, or give the say the paediatrician a little bit more time to run through some further assessments. Next slide. Thanks, Tori. Thank you. So this one, I apologise that this slide is a little bit wordy. It's what are the disability requirements? So this has just been taken straight out of the legislation. I did try to attempt to break it down, but felt perhaps I shouldn't, just purely because this is really what the agency is looking to when you're applying for access. So I think it's really important that I don't try and reword it, that we actually leave it as it stands, and I'll try and talk to it as best as I can to explain it. So the NDIA uses certain disability requirements to decide whether a person is eligible for NDIS funding. a person will meet the disability requirement if they meet each of the following. So the first one is one or more intellectual, cognitive, neurological, sensory or physical impairments. So there only needs to be one, or one or more impairments attributable to a psychiatric condition. Impairments are or likely to be permanent. So there's that word again, permanent. So you really need to be demonstrating that this disability or impairment that they have as a result of the disability will be permanent. Impairments result in substantially reduced functional capacity to undertake one or more of the following. So again, you only need to have one impact. So these might be communication, social interaction, learning, mobility, self-care or self-management. So I just want to talk a little bit around this word impairment. What it means is you may have, what I'm trying to say is some people may have a diagnosed disability and think, great, I can go into the scheme. However, the impact or the impairment needs to be enough for them to warrant that, yes, you need this full access. So for example, if someone has an issue around communicating as a result of being deaf, they need to demonstrate that the deafness is a lifelong and the communication then is an impairment that they're going to have lifelong that they may need support in. So therefore the agency may grant the access and say, okay, this person needs support with their communication. That may involve Auslan training for themselves or for their carers or support people in their lives. Another example around self-management. So someone who may have a diagnosis of bipolar may have some impairments. I always hesitate using that word, but it is the word that the agency used. So excuse me if I sort of stop every time I say it, because I find it a little bit difficult to always be using that word. So they may have an impairment in being able to manage their days, look at what their day looks like, plan out their days. They will need to demonstrate that they've had treatment for their condition and the treatment has not been effective. And therefore the agency will then say, this is permanent and lifelong and they need support in this area of their life. Another thing is the agency will look at is, are they able to participate socially with others or have a job? Is this an area that they need additional support with? And evidence needs to show that the support under the NDIS is likely to be required across the whole lifetime. So when you think about that, there's a lot that goes into that in relation to making a decision whether someone gets that full disability access. It's quite a lot in there. So I apologise that it's wordy, but there's lots of elements that the agency will look to in granting that access decision. So how do you do this? You have to do what's called an access request. And what you need to do with this is you need to call the 1-800 number, which is NDIS number. You can do it on the phone. And what they will do is they'll take down your personal details. They may even step you through part of what they call the ARF, which is the access request form. There's two sections to it. There's part A, which is all your personal details that you can actually give over the phone. And there's a part B. The part B is a really crucial one because this one has to be done by a treating specialist. And they're the people who are going to provide that evidence that's needed in relation to those disability requirements that I mentioned before. You can also do it yourself online. You can go online and there is a form there that you can complete yourself and take it along to the treating professional to complete. I really, really recommend that you attach all supporting documents. Don't just fill out the forms and send them on their merry way. Any supporting information you have to support in terms of evidence of disability, send it along with the access request form. So the more information you give the agency, the better off you are, because they can look at it and try and say, yeah, look, I've got this report that aligns with these disability requirements. So this evidence we're talking about from the treating professionals, what is it? What are they looking for? Quite often you hear stories of people going through this process with a lot of frustration and a lot of confusion as to why they were declined access, because they feel like, I've provided all the information. Why am I getting this not back? So these are the points that the agency are looking to when they go through the request. So the first one is the information that you provide needs to be recent. They're really looking for information that's 6 months old. So some people who may be slightly older, when the scheme came in and had their diagnosis maybe 20 years ago, are sending in that documentation, the agency will not accept it. So it really needs to be recent. It needs to be relevant. And by relevant, it means the information that you're providing needs to be provided by a professional who aligns with that primary disability. So for example, to have a physiotherapist fill out an access request form in relation to someone who may have autism spectrum disorder would not be deemed the appropriate professional. It would be someone like a pediatrician or a psychologist that would be required. Confirm. So this one's a big one. I think this is one that people often miss in their access request form. So confirming is to confirm the primary disability using standardized assessment tools. So what does that mean? What is a standardized assessment tool? So for each disability type, there's certain tools that professionals use to look at disability and the impacts that disability may be happening on that person, because we know that disability can impact people in lots of different ways. So the standardized assessment tools are used to confirm the disability and the impact. I'm just checking my notes because I do have an example. So for example, someone who may have a diagnosis of cerebral palsy, an occupational therapist, a pediatrician or a physiotherapist is able to complete the standardized assessment tool appropriate to that disability, which is the Gross Motor Functional Classification Scale. So that's what they'll be looking for. They need to see those tools completed by the relevant professional. Where do you find this information? How do you know that you've got the right tool to send through, that you've got the right reports from people? If you do go to the NDIS website, there's a whole section around accessing the scheme. It's down the side column. If you click in, it actually tells you all the different tools that are used for different disability types. So it's really important that when you're talking to your treating professionals, when they're writing you supporting evidence back to the agency, that you talk to them about these standardized assessment tools, that they're included in those reports. So the impact. So I talked before about the impacts, whether it be self-management, communication, mobility. The evidence needs to go through those key areas of how your disability is impacting you in one or more of those areas. So the reports need to also talk about that. Treatments. This is particularly relevant to people who have a psychosocial disability. So you really need to be showing that this person is treatment resistant. They've had ABCD treatments. This has been the outcome. It hasn't been effective. And therefore now there's a permanent disability that needs ongoing support. So who provides this evidence? So I've talked a little bit on that, just in terms of it has to be the relevant person that relates to the disability. Lots of people get their local GP to fill out the documentation, and quite often the access request will come back as a decline. And that's purely because it doesn't have enough evidence around the specialisation of talking about that specific disability. So it's really important that you look very closely at who's providing the evidence. So again, it could be the paediatrician, the orthopaedic surgeon, an occupational therapist, speech therapist, neurologist, psychologist, psychiatrist, physiotherapist. But make sure it's the right person because it may be declined otherwise. Okay, so bits and pieces to keep in mind. The NDIS doesn't replace or fund support systems that are provided by other service systems like healthcare or education. So that means things like, let's just say I had an accident and now I have a spinal cord injury and I go into rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is funded by the health system to get me to a certain level of functioning and then NDIS may kick in after. So there's a fine line there about who's responsible for what and when. Education system, teachers' aides, that's a really common question that NDIS gets asked. Teachers' aides are the responsibility of the education system, not the NDIS. So it really looks at who's doing what and who's responsible for what. The NDIS funds supports that are considered reasonable and necessary. I'm sure a lot of you have heard the term reasonable and necessary and are quite confused about what does that actually mean. So I'm actually going to unpack that a little bit further on in one of the slides, just to give you an example of what that means. The supports need to be cost-effective and evidence-based, and it's because it's an insurance scheme. The NDIS will not fund supports that are likely to cause harm to another person, supports that are not related to their disability. So with that, there's a lot of people who may have a diagnosed disability, but may also have a health condition. So that needs to be split. NDIS will fund the disability side, but the health system will fund the health condition side. So it can be really tricky to split those things apart sometimes, because we know that sometimes they can interact with each other. They won't duplicate other supports already provided through the NDIS or supports that relate to data cost living. So things like rent, paying for medication, things like that. NDIS will not fund those things. So what happens once you've managed to get all this information together, you've filled out your forms, you've sent them on your way, and you've got your fingers crossed that you're going to get access? The first thing I really highly recommend that you do is that you check with the NDIA that they've actually received all your information. It's really, really important. There's been so many stories of people waiting for a decision and waiting, and then when they finally get to the point they ring up, they're told, we don't have any record of your documentation. So it's really, really important to double check that they have everything that you've sent through. You can do that by calling them on the 1-800 number, or there's a fantastic thing on their website called web chat. So you can do it online. The beauty of web chat is you can actually save the script of the conversation that you've had with the NDIA. So you can keep a really tight timeline of when you sent what and who said what when. So the web chat is your friend. It's a very good function that's available to you. So once that's all in, an NDIA access delegate will look at the request and make a decision. If they're unsure, they may ask to speak to your treating professional, or they may actually ask to speak to you to get some more information. If you've been granted access, you'll receive a letter to say, yes, you've been granted access, and then a planning meeting will be arranged with you. Or if you've been declined access, you will also get a letter. So if you've been declined, you will get a letter that states out the reasons why. So you can actually then go back and ask for a review of that request, but it's really important that you focus on the why, because it may be that you need to provide further documentation back to the agency. So just wanted to talk a little bit about, once you get that big tick and you've got the access, then the next step is having your first planning meeting. So generally your first planning meeting is run by what is referred to as a local area coordinator, and they work in partnership with NDIS. Once you become, already almost said it, once you have gained access into the scheme, you're deemed a participant of the scheme. So you'll be referred to by the agency as a participant. So with the planning meeting, this is something that generally can spark a lot of fear in people, because they don't know what does this mean, what is it going to involve. So the best advice I can give you is to be prepared. And the way to be prepared is this little booklet you can see on the screen there. It's called the Planning Booklet Number 2, NDIS. It's a really helpful book for you prior to any planning meeting. You can also find this on the NDIS website. It's got lots of information about the NDIS, but it also helps you almost brainstorm your thoughts prior to the planning meeting. So the planning meeting will generally consist of the planner, talking to you a little bit about your life and what aspects of your life are you needing support with. They will develop what they call a participant statement, and this shows up on your NDIS plan. So a participant statement talks about who you are, where you might be living, the types of relationships you have in your life, and the things that you do during your day. I really recommend that you take some time to write that yourself. You can write it in the little planning booklet, it steps you through there, or type it up or handwrite it and give it to that planner. The reason I say that is quite often what is said in those planning meetings can sometimes not be reflected accurately in your plan. So I would definitely recommend you spend the time to write it yourself so it's reflected accurately and that you're happy with how it's worded as well. The second component of a plan will be, what are your goals? So what is it that you really want some support with that relates back to your disability? Because that is how the delegate of the NDIA or the planner is going to make decisions about what sort of funding they put in your plan to be able to support you with that specific goal. So what I wanted to do is just to give you a little bit of example of how that works. So for example, so I'm just checking my notes because I wrote down an example just to try and demonstrate it. So just bear with me. So for example, Sally has an impairment of vision. Sally would really like to be able to be independent and she'd really like to be able to do her grocery shopping herself. So her goal would be, I would really like to do my grocery shopping independently. So what sort of support is Sally thinking she might need to be able to learn how to do that? She might need an occupational therapist to provide her with orientation training to help her get to and from the supermarket, but also to orientate around the actual supermarket itself to be able to find things. She may need equipment, so she may need her cane. She may also need a reader, which actually reads the labels of items in the supermarket. How terrific is that? They're wonderful devices. And there's also something else, and I cannot remember what it's called. It's like a mapping device that actually helps Sally to navigate exactly where she is. So those supports would be an occupational therapist. She may also need support from a support worker for a couple of times until she feels confident that she can now do this independently. So reasonable and necessary, that's what I wanted to touch on. What is this thing reasonable and necessary? And looking at that exact example. So what happens with the planning is that an NDIA delegate will need to look at, okay, this is Sally, this is her disability, this is her impairment, she's not able to be able to see the items to purchase them, this is her goal, she wants to do it herself, these are the supports that she wants in her plan. So reasonable and necessary, this is what a delegate will do. They will look at the legislation and these are the key areas. Will the support assist the participant to pursue the goals? Yeah, it will. It will support her for her goal to shop independently. Will it assist her to be able to undertake social and economic activities? Yep, it will do that. Does the support represent value for money in that the costs and the supports are reasonable relative to the benefit achieved and the cost of alternative support? Well, yeah, the benefit's huge. Sally's now going to be independent and be able to do this task herself. And the cost is going to be a lot less because alternate support would mean a support person with her every single time she wants to do grocery shopping. Is the support effective and beneficial? Yes, we're increasing her independence and it aligns with the values of the NDIS. Does it take into account what's reasonable for families and friends to provide? So the agency will look at Sally's age, Sally's 30. Is it reasonable to expect her mum and dad or her friends to come and do grocery shopping with her every single time? Does the general community do that? No. So it's reasonable for that area. Is this support most appropriately funded through the NDIS? Yes, it is. It's directly related to her disability. And is the support likely to cause her harm or risk? Not likely when you've got an OT there providing her with that orientation training. So when you're looking at the goals, really think about, how does this goal relate back to my disability? What's my goal and what supports do I need to achieve this goal? And how am I going to do it? What do I need to get there? So if you can think about those things prior to the planning meeting and jot them in that little book or put them on a piece of paper, it'll make that planning process for you, I think, a lot more streamlined, rather than being put in a spot of, oh gosh, I don't know what to say to this planner. I hadn't really thought about this. Okay, the other thing I just wanted to mention is that if you're caring for somebody, then a carer impact statement as a piece of evidence is really, really valuable. There's a template on the CareSpace website, and it provides you with different areas to talk about. And it also provides a template and some examples of how to word the situation. So the carer impact statement really talks about who you're caring for and the impacts it has on their day-to-day. So any questions about that, the planning process?
Just wanted to let you know, Janine, we've got another 15 minutes to go.
Right. I tend to talk a lot, so I will pass over to the lovely Tori, who will talk to us more about NDIS plans and different supports available.
There's also a question in the chat box. I don't know if someone wants to answer that quickly, which is, if my partner has a goal to return to work,
I've answered it.
Hours. Sorry?
I've been messaging Will separately, so
oh, you've done that?
We're covered off. Yep. All good.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks, Jane.
We're multitasking. Okay, so hopefully everything's gone smoothly. You've got your NDIS plan. Like Janine was saying, all of those NDIS funds will link directly back to the goals in the plan. There's a couple of examples there about what some of the goals might be, which Janine had already sort of touched on. So living independently, getting and keeping a job, learning a new skill, participating in the community. These were some of the resources as well that Janine mentioned briefly. So this is a really good slide to take notice of. So up the top there, you'll see the 3 different planning booklets that you can access from the NDIS website. Booklet number 2 was the one that Janine referenced before. That's very, very useful in terms of planning. Booklet number 3 is a really great one because it will help you understand your NDIS plan once you've got it. My care space was where you can access examples of the carer statement. And Janine, I think you mentioned before about accessing a disability advocate. So there's some really good websites there too. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about those, Janine, before I click through?
No, that's okay. You can continue. I'll be quiet.
Okay. Alrighty. So in my last 10 minutes, I'm going to give you a blisteringly fast rundown of how your side works in the NDIS space. So we are a registered NDIS provider. That means we've gone through a whole bunch of checks and balances and got our NDIS registration. We cover all of Sydney in terms of our service provision. We have so many diverse participants that access our services. At the moment, we've got, I think, nearly 400 participants that access our supports. Currently, we don't provide services to anyone under the age of 18, and we're also not providing services for participants who have higher needs in terms of their personal care. That might change in the future, but for now, we are focusing at what we're good at. So that's older participants. Okay, these are our service types. So community access, that's a very popular one. So that's supporting people to go out and participate in community in the ways that they want. Obviously, all of these services are participant directed. So it's based around supporting that person to achieve their goals with the services that we offer. So community access, cleaning and domestic assistance. So that's obviously support in the home to do some of those more domestic tasks. Personal care, so we've got here that could be showering, dressing, prompting medication. It might be a meal preparation, which is something that's very popular. So we have a lot of our participants that really enjoy working with a support worker to prepare meals for the next week, and they might freeze some, and it really does help with their independence. Gardening, home maintenance, and then allied health. We have a huge range of allied health professionals that work with us to support our participants. Some of those services also are available online. So obviously when we went into lockdown, we had a lot of participants that continued to access support with their care worker. It's just that they were doing it over the internet. A lot of our allied health professionals as well adapted very quickly to deliver those services online with our participants. We have 3 social groups. Again, some of those groups adapted to being online during COVID because obviously we couldn't go out and about. So our darts group is for people who are in wheelchairs. They have some amazing online activities that they've been doing lately. So they do lots of trivia. Guess That Tune is another one, which is really popular. But in non-COVID circumstances, they would be going out and about and going to musicals and theatre. This is a picture of one of our participants at the zoo. So they do lots of really exciting activities. We have a group that used to run each Friday for participants who have an intellectual disability. Again, this is a group that's very goal focused and oriented. We are supporting our participants to improve their social skills, to learn things like money handling, maybe interacting with public transport and understanding how to catch trains and read a timetable. So we really are working towards building capacity for our participants that attend the Friday group. The men's group is a very small group for men who have a mental health diagnosis. That one, I would say, is much more focused on being a peer support group. So there's a lot of sharing of experiences, checking in with each other, really supporting each other in their mental health journey. So it's a really, really lovely, tight-knit group of guys that attend that group. As I said, most of our groups at the moment have moved to online activities, but if you did have any questions or wanted to look at joining one of those groups, you can always contact us for more information to find out how they're operating at the moment. These are our contact details. If you want to touch base with me or our NDIS team, you can always reach out there. I'm not sure, it might be easiest if there's questions for Janine. You're also welcome to send those through to that NDIS inbox, and I can liaise with Janine and make sure that we can get a response to you. But yeah, we're lovely, we're friendly. You can always call us up for a chat. We're happy to talk to you about our services and the NDIS. And then these are the rest of our events that are coming up for Carers Week. So how did I do? I've got 7 minutes left. So we do have some time for questions if anybody wanted to raise anything or had any comments.
Thank you so much, Tori and Janine, for such a wonderful afternoon session. It's a labyrinth, the world of social services. I don't know, it's huge. If anyone has any further questions for Tori or Janine, please do not hesitate to send them through. Being Carers Week, we do have to wrap up the session because, of course, we've got more sessions happening this afternoon. But if anyone has any questions, Tori put the contact details. Please check out the website as well, the Your Side website. It's got a just amazing amount of information, and any carers that are here, if you've got any further questions, there's lots of information for carers as well. Tori and Janine, any last words before we close it up?
I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming today to learn more about the NDIS, and I just hope you've been able to take something away from the session today that will help you on your journey.
Yep, agree completely. Thanks, everybody.
Can we be sent an email with the link to the Your Side website?
Absolutely, we can. We'll send that through to all of the attendees from today, and any information the girls think's relevant, we'll pop into an email and send it out to everyone. So yeah, and if we've missed anything, please send it through. But we are just going to wrap up the session now. Thank you so much for everyone coming.
Thank you.
Have a lovely afternoon. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Bye bye.